Day 9 now of our 20-day Genesis reading plan. Today I've entitled this one Finally, because finally this promised son that we've been hearing about, that we've been waiting for the last, 4 days, 3 days, finally makes an appearance in the story. I'm going to be reading slightly difficulty because I'm going to have to skip through pages, but I'm going to be reading in John Goldingay's Genesis for Everyone, which is also a really good commentary. And, you know, hopefully it's quite an accessible one. If you want to borrow it from me, you can borrow it from me. And it's also, you know, maybe even a good one to purchase. There's 2 chapters of this book, part 1 and part 2 for Genesis. And it just explains in a quite simple, clear, easy to understand way a little bit more about what might be going on in the chapters of Genesis, so it can be really helpful. So here we go. Finally, the time has come. Genesis chapter 20. Yahweh indeed dealt with Sarah as he had said. When Yahweh did for Sarah as he had spoken, Sarah became pregnant and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the season of which God had spoken. Abraham called his son who had been born to him, whom Sarah had bore to him, Isaac. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God charged him, Abraham being 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made laughter for me, since everyone who hears will laugh in connection with me. And she said, who would have announced to Abraham, Sarah has nursed children, but I have borne a son in his old age. The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she bore Abraham, laughing. She said to Abraham, throw out this maidservant and her son, because this maidservant's son is not to inherit with my son Isaac. The matter was very distressing to Abraham because of his son. But God said to Abraham, do not be distressed about the boy or about your maidservant. Whatever Sarah says to you, listen to her voice, because it is through Isaac that offspring will be named for you. The son of the maidservant I will make into a great nation too, because he is your offspring. Early next morning, Abraham took food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He put them on her shoulder and the child and sent her away. She went and wandered about in the Beersheba wilderness. When the water in the skin was finished, she left the child under one of the bushes and went and sat herself down at a distance, a bow shot away, because, as she said, I am not going to watch the child die. So she sat down at a distance and wept aloud. God listened to the boy's voice, and an aide of God called to Hagar from the heavens and said to her, what is happening to you, Hagar? Don't be afraid, because God has listened to the voice of the boy where he is. Get up, lift up the boy, take him by your hand, because I am going to make him into a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and got the boy to drink. God was with the boy. He grew and lived in the wilderness, and he became a bowman. He lived in the Paran wilderness. His mother got a wife for him from the country of Egypt. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, his army commander, said to Abraham, God is with you in everything that you do. So now swear to me here by God that you will not deal falsely with me or with my offspring or with my posterity. You will act towards me and towards my country in which you are staying, in accordance with the commitment that I have shown towards you." Abraham said, "I do swear." But Abraham complained to Abimelech concerning a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. Abimelech said, "I do not know who did this thing. You have not told me. I have not heard of it until today." Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them sealed a covenant. Abraham set apart 7 ewes from the flock. Abimelech said to Abraham, "What are these 7 ewes here that you have set apart?" He said, "You are to accept the 7 ewes from my hand so that it will be called Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath there." When they had sealed the covenant at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, his army commander, set off and went back to the country of the Philistines. He planted a tamarisk at Beersheba and called there in the name of Yahweh, God forever. Abraham stayed in the country of the Philistines for a long time. Genesis 22. Sometime after this, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "I'm here." He said, "Take your son, your only one, the one you love, Isaac, and get yourself to the region of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering there, on one of the mountains that I will tell you about." So, early the next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey and took 2 of his boys with him, his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering, set out, and went to the place that God told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from a distance. Abraham said to his boys, "You stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there and worship and come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac, and took in his own hand the fire and the knife, and the 2 of them walked together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father?" He said, "I'm here, son." "Here are the fire and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God will see to the sheep for the burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked together. They came to the place that God had told him about. There Abraham built an altar and laid out the wood and bound his son Isaac and put him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But Yahweh's aide called to him from the heavens and said, "Abraham, Abraham!" He said, "I'm here." And the heavens replied, "Don't reach out your hand to the boy. Don't do anything to him, because I now know you revere God. You have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Abraham looked up and saw there a ram caught in the thicket by its thorns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham named that place Yahweh Sees, so that it is said today, "On Yahweh's mountain it is seen." Yahweh's aide called to Abraham a second time from the heavens and said, "By myself I swear," Yahweh's proclamation, "that because you have done this thing and not withheld your son, your only one, I will bless you abundantly and make your offspring very numerous, so that they are like the stars in the heavens and the sand that is on the seashore. Your offspring will take over their enemy's city, and all the nations on the earth will bless themselves by your offspring, because you listened to my voice." Abraham then went back to his boys, and they set off and went together to Beersheba. So Abraham lived at Beersheba. Sometime after this, Abraham was told, "Now Milcah too has borne children to your brother Nahor, Uz his firstborn, Buz his brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Chesed, Hazo, Pildash, Jillaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel became the father of Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore Nahor, Abraham's brother. His secondary wife, whose name was Remu, also bore Tabar, Gaham, Tahash, and Makkah." So a quick few thoughts about those 2 chapters that we've just heard read. Chapters 21 and 22. Finally, Isaac is born. And I think it sees that picture of that long-awaited promise of God. And in the end, when it all happens, everyone's like, oh, you have given me laughter. Yes, I always kind of knew it would happen. Well, that's how it feels for me. Have you ever felt like that, where you look back on your life, you look back on the path that you've taken, and you say, I see God in that. I see where God was moving. And to be honest, if we were totally frank with ourselves, that while we were in that moment, while we were treading that path and that journey, we had no clue where God was, and we were freaking out about whether God was with us. So we have that journey, we have that final consummation of the promise of God. Finally, we have Isaac. And then the chapters get far more difficult, far more challenging. I thought it was challenging last time, but then we have this casting out of Hagar, and luckily we have that repeated theme that God looks after Hagar, he looks after Ishmael. They will be protected. And it's weird because the focus entirety of the text is always Abraham. I mean, in fact, I always hear when I'm reading it out that God responds to Ishmael's crying out, not Hagar's. And I always think, why is that? Why are you responding to the child? It's an interesting question. What do you think? Do you hear that? Is that how you took it? Because moving on from there, we've got an even more perplexing chapter, this account of the sacrifice of Isaac. We have just waited. We have literally been every day thinking, when is this promised child going to be born? We've finally got Isaac, and the very next chapter, sacrifice him. It's a challenge to read those chapters and those difficulties within it and not hear the problems, not want the text to talk more about all the surrounding things. Now, totally you should be thinking about that. I always wonder, Isaac must have known, right? If your dad's standing there with a dagger, you're like, how do you have good father relationships? I worry about telling my daughter to run faster on a 5 kilometres, that I'm torturing her, that she's going to hate me for years afterwards because I'm going, go on, Mimi, you can run faster. Slightly different having a dagger sort of suspended above you. I'm not sure that many children could rebound from that. But it doesn't focus on Isaac at all. The story is entirely focused upon Abraham, about the relationship that Abraham has with God. And we've seen that Abraham has a lack of trust. We've seen that obviously with Hagar, he's tried to hurry the promise of God. And he's not relied fully that God is actually going to do what has been promised. So maybe this is the end, the final sort of step in Abraham's journey, that he's actually getting it. God will make this happen. God has promised. So even though he's asking you to do something that seems like it completely scuppers everything, God will have a plan. But that doesn't mean we can't ask those questions, and it keeps it interesting to think, wow, I find this passage really difficult. He's just been pleading with God on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. What if there's only 10 people there, righteous people? Will you save the whole city? And he doesn't seem to say anything about Isaac. It's hard. It's hard. But sometimes when we struggle, we've got to like leave it. You know, you struggle, and then you say, okay, there's some things I'm not going to understand, and I'm just going to keep wrestling with them. So I hope you're enjoying mostly wrestling with these questions, because there's going to be plenty more questions, plenty more wrestlings to do in our long lifetime of journeying with Jesus.